The stagecoach lurched to a halt in the middle of nowhere, and Zara Patterson knew with a sinking certainty that her worst fears were about to come true. The driver, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained teeth, climbed down and approached the window where she sat with her 17-year-old sister, Clara, who was burning with fever and struggling to breathe. It was August 1878, and the heat of the California desert pressed down on them like a heavy blanket, making Clara's condition even more unbearable. "Miss Patterson, I am real sorry, but we cannot continue with your sister in this state," the driver said, his voice gruff but not entirely unkind. "The other passengers are worried about catching whatever she has, and frankly, I am too. We are still 2 days from San Jose, and she needs a doctor now." Zara felt her heart clench. "Please, sir, we have nowhere else to go. Our aunt is expecting us in San Jose. She is all we have left since our parents passed." The driver shook his head. "There is a small settlement about 5 miles back. They might have someone who can help, but I cannot risk the other passengers or delay the schedule any longer." Zara looked at Clara, whose face was flushed and damp with sweat. Her sister's eyes were closed, and her breathing came in short, labored gasps. They had been traveling for nearly a week from their small farm in Nevada, after their father died of a heart ailment, and their mother followed 3 months later from grief and pneumonia. The farm had been seized for debts, and their only option was to reach their mother's sister in San Jose, California. "I will not leave her," Zara said firmly, though her voice trembled. "Then you both get off here," the driver said. "I will leave you supplies and water, but the stage moves on in 10 minutes. One of the male passengers, a portly merchant, leaned out the window. "This is absurd. We are already behind schedule. If they want to stay together, fine, but let us be on our way." Zara felt tears burning her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She was 22 years old, and she had promised her dying mother that she would take care of Clara. But as she looked at her sister's deteriorating condition, she realized that staying here in the middle of the desert would likely mean death for them both. "Please," she whispered, but the driver had already turned away. Another passenger, a woman with a pinched face and suspicious eyes, called out, "It could be cholera or typhoid. We cannot risk it." The driver opened the door. "Miss Patterson, you need to decide now." Clara stirred and opened her eyes, which were glassy with fever. "Zara," she whispered, "go. Get to Aunt Margaret. I will be fine." "No," Zara said, gripping her sister's hot hand. "I will not leave you." "You have to," Clara said, her voice barely audible. "One of us needs to reach San Jose. One of us needs to survive." The driver cleared his throat. "Miss, I do not want to be cruel, but if you insist on staying, I will have to remove both of you. If you go on alone, at least you can send help back from San Jose." Zara felt as though her heart was being torn in two. The logic was sound, but the thought of abandoning her sister felt like a betrayal of everything she had promised. "There is a ranch about 20 miles east of here," one of the other passengers offered, a young woman with kind eyes. "The Harrison Ranch. They might take in your sister until help arrives." The driver nodded. "That is true. The Harrison family is decent folk. If someone can get your sister there, they would likely care for her until you can return. But who would take Clara there? And how?" Zara felt paralyzed by the impossible choice before her. 30 seconds, the driver said, pulling out his pocket watch. Clara squeezed Zara's hand weakly. "Go, sister. Please, for both of us." With tears streaming down her face, Zara made the most painful decision of her life. She kissed Clara's burning forehead and stepped out of the stagecoach, leaving her sister lying on the seat. The driver and another passenger carried Clara into the sparse shade of a rocky outcropping, leaving her with blankets, water, and what little medical supplies they had. I will send help as soon as I reach San Jose, Zara said, kneeling beside Clara. I swear it. Hold on, please hold on. Clara managed a weak smile. I will try. I love you. I love you too, Zara sobbed, then forced herself to stand and return to the stagecoach. As the stage pulled away, Zara looked back at her sister's small figure under the outcropping, alone in the vast desert landscape. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, and she prayed it would not be the worst mistake of her life. The remaining journey to San Jose passed in a blur of guilt and anxiety. Zara barely ate or slept, tormented by visions of Clara dying alone in the desert heat. When they finally reached San Jose 2 days later, she immediately went to the sheriff's office, only to find it closed for the evening. Desperate, she made her way to the address her mother had given her, hoping her aunt would know what to do. Margaret Winters was a widow in her 50s who ran a boarding house near the center of San Jose. She welcomed Zara with open arms, but her face fell when she heard about Clara. "Oh, my dear child," she said, pulling Zara into an embrace. "That must have been unbearable." "I need to send help immediately," Zara said, pulling away. "Can you help me? Do you know anyone who could ride out there?" Margaret hesitated. "It has been 2 days, Zara, and you said she was very ill." "No," Zara said sharply. "Do not say it. She is alive. She has to be alive. I need someone to go back for her." Margaret sighed. "Let me think. There is a man who boards here sometimes, a cowboy who works various ranches in the area. His name is Nathan Hart. He is honest and capable, and he knows the territory well. He was supposed to return tonight from a cattle drive. If he is back, perhaps he could help." Zara seized on this hope like a drowning person grabbing a rope. "When will he be here? Can we wait for him?" "Let me see if his horse is in the stable," Margaret said. They went out back, and sure enough, there was a large bay gelding in one of the stalls, still wearing its saddle blanket. "He is back," Margaret said. "He must be at the saloon. He usually stops there before coming home. Let me send word." "I will go myself," Zara said, already moving toward the street. "Zara, respectable women do not go to saloons," Margaret protested. "I do not care about respectability right now," Zara said. "My sister's life is at stake." She hurried through the darkening streets of San Jose, asking directions until she found the saloon. It was a rough-looking establishment with music and laughter spilling out into the street. Zara took a deep breath and pushed through the doors. The room fell silent as every head turned to stare at her. She stood in the doorway, her traveling dress dusty and wrinkled, her dark hair falling loose from its pins, and her green eyes fierce with determination. "I am looking for Nathan Hart," she announced, her voice steady despite her racing heart. A tall man stood up from a table in the back. He was probably in his mid-20s, with sun-bronzed skin, dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and blue eyes that assessed her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. He wore dusty trail clothes and had the lean, muscular build of someone who spent his life working outdoors. "I am Nathan Hart," he said, moving toward her with an easy, confident stride. "What can I do for you, miss?" "My sister is dying in the desert," Zara said bluntly. "I need someone to ride back and bring her to safety. Mrs. Winters said you might help." Nathan's expression immediately became serious. "Where exactly is she?" "About 2 days' ride by stagecoach, somewhere between here and the Nevada border. The driver left her near a rocky outcropping. There was mention of the Harrison Ranch being 20 miles east." Nathan frowned. "2 days ago." "In this heat, please," Zara said, and now her voice did break. "I know it has been too long. I know the chances are not good, but I cannot live with myself if I do not try. I will pay you whatever you want. I do not have much money now, but I will work. I will do anything." Nathan looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression softened. I will need better directions than that. Come on, let us go talk to Margaret. She can give me a decent meal while you tell me everything you remember about the location." Relief flooded through Zara so intensely that she swayed on her feet. Nathan caught her elbow, steadying her. "When did you last eat?" he asked. "I do not remember," she admitted. "Right," he said. "Let us go." He guided her out of the saloon, ignoring the curious stares and whispered comments from the other patrons. As they walked back to the boarding house, Nathan asked careful questions about the journey, the landmarks Zara remembered, and Clara's condition. "The driver mentioned a settlement 5 miles back from where he left her," Zara said, "but I do not know if anyone actually went there." "There is a small trading post in that area," Nathan said thoughtfully, "run by a man named Joe Kincaid. He is not much for hospitality, but he might have taken her in if someone paid him enough." "The passengers gave her some money," Zara remembered suddenly. "The young woman with kind eyes, she pressed some coins into Clara's hand before we left." Nathan nodded. "That is something at least. If she had money, Kincaid might have helped her." They reached the boarding house, and Margaret immediately set about preparing food for both of them. Nathan spread a map on the dining table and had Zara trace the approximate route the stage had taken. "The thing is," he said slowly, "even if I leave at first light, it will take me 3 to 4 days of hard riding to get there and back. That is assuming I can find her quickly." "But you will try?" Zara asked, her eyes pleading. Nathan looked at her, taking in the exhaustion and desperation on her face, the way her hands trembled slightly as she traced the map, the fierce love that drove her to walk into a saloon and demand help from a stranger. "I will try," he said. "But I want you to understand that the odds are not in our favor. It has been 2 days in brutal heat, and your sister was already very ill." "I understand," Zara said, "but I have to hope." Nathan stood up. "I will need to gather supplies and let my employer know I will be gone for a week. I work for the Miller Ranch right now, but they owe me time off. I will leave before dawn." "Thank you," Zara said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you so much." Nathan looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Do not thank me yet. Wait until I actually accomplish something." He left to make his preparations, and Margaret insisted that Zara eat and then go to bed. But Zara could not sleep. She lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling and praying harder than she had ever prayed in her life. Before dawn, she heard the sound of a horse in the yard. She jumped up and ran downstairs to find Nathan loading his saddlebags. He looked up as she appeared in the doorway. "You should be sleeping," he said. "I could not," Zara admitted. "Please, when you find her, tell her I love her. Tell her I am sorry I left her." Nathan swung up into his saddle. "If I find her alive, you can tell her yourself." And with that, he rode off into the gray pre-dawn light, leaving Zara standing in the yard with her heart full of hope and terror. The next few days were the longest of Zara's life. She tried to keep busy helping Margaret with the boarding house, but every moment her mind was on Clara and Nathan. Had he found the right location? Was Clara still alive? Had she made it to the trading post or the Harrison ranch? Margaret tried to comfort her, but even her aunt's optimism seemed strained as the days passed. On the 4th day, Zara stood at the window for hours, watching the road for any sign of Nathan's return. As the sun began to set on the 5th day, Zara had nearly given up hope. She was sitting in the parlor, staring blankly at a book she was not reading when Margaret suddenly called from the kitchen. "Zara, someone is coming." Zara dropped the book and ran to the window. In the fading light, she could see a rider approaching, and he was not alone. There was a second horse, and slumped in its saddle, held steady by the rider's arm, was a small figure. "Clara," Zara breathed, and then she was running out the door, down the steps, and into the street. Nathan brought the horses to a stop in front of the boarding house, and Zara could see now that it was indeed Clara, wrapped in blankets and barely conscious but alive. Alive. "She is very weak," Nathan said as he carefully dismounted and then reached up to ease Clara down from the saddle. "But she is alive." Zara was sobbing now as she helped Nathan carry Clara inside. Margaret had already prepared a bed, and they laid Clara down gently. The girl's face was thin and pale, her lips cracked from dehydration, but her eyes fluttered open when she felt the soft mattress beneath her. "Zara," she whispered. "I am here," Zara said, clutching her sister's hand. "I am right here. You are safe now." "I knew you would come back," Clara murmured, and then her eyes closed again. Margaret took over, bringing cool water and beginning the work of nursing Clara back to health. Nathan stood awkwardly in the doorway, clearly exhausted from his journey. "I found her at the trading post," he said quietly. "Kincaid did take her in, but he was not exactly caring for her properly. He had her sleeping in a storage room and was barely giving her water. When I got there, she was in bad shape." Zara turned to him, tears streaming down her face. "You saved her life. How can I ever repay you?" Nathan shook his head. "Just see that she gets better. That will be payment enough." But Zara could see the exhaustion in every line of his body. "When did you last sleep?" "I caught a few hours here and there," he said, but his eyes were bloodshot and heavy-lidded. "Margaret, can Nathan have a room for the night?" Zara asked. "Of course," Margaret said immediately. "Nathan, you take the room at the end of the hall. And do not even think about arguing. You have earned a proper rest." Nathan was too tired to protest. He nodded his thanks and disappeared down the hall. Over the next 2 weeks, Clara slowly recovered under Margaret's skilled care. She had been suffering from a severe respiratory infection, worsened by dehydration and the harsh conditions at the trading post. There were several nights when her fever spiked dangerously high, and Zara sat by her bedside, terrified that she would lose her sister after all. But Clara was stronger than she looked. Gradually, her fever broke, her breathing eased, and color returned to her cheeks. By the end of the 2nd week, she was sitting up in bed and eating solid food. Nathan had returned to his work at the Miller Ranch, but he stopped by every few days to check on Clara's progress. Zara found herself looking forward to these visits more than she cared to admit. There was something solid and dependable about Nathan, something that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since her parents died. One evening, about 3 weeks after Nathan had brought Clara home, he arrived at the boarding house with a package wrapped in brown paper. "What is this?" Zara asked as he handed it to her. "Open it," he said with a slight smile that transformed his usually serious face. She unwrapped the paper to find several yards of beautiful green fabric, the color of new leaves in spring. "Nathan, I cannot accept this," she said, though her fingers caressed the soft material longingly. "It is too much." "Your aunt mentioned that you need a new dress for church," Nathan said, looking slightly embarrassed. "I thought that color would suit you." Zara felt her cheeks warm. "That is very thoughtful, but really I cannot." "Consider it back payment," Nathan said. "Margaret has been feeding me dinner twice a week and I have yet to pay her for it. This is for both of you." It was a polite fiction and they both knew it, but it allowed Zara to accept the gift without feeling like she was taking charity. She smiled up at him. "Thank you, Nathan. It is beautiful." Clara, who was now well enough to sit in the parlor, called out from her chair by the window. "Zara, stop being stubborn and just say thank you properly." Both Nathan and Zara laughed and some of the awkwardness dissolved. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" Zara asked. "Margaret is making chicken stew." "I would like that," Nathan said. It became a pattern over the following months. Nathan would stop by 2 or 3 times a week, ostensibly to check on Clara, but really, Zara began to suspect to see her. They would sit in the parlor after dinner, talking about everything and nothing. Nathan told her about growing up on a small ranch in Texas, about losing his parents to influenza when he was 19, about drifting west and working various ranches until he ended up in California. Zara told him about her childhood in Nevada, about her father's struggle to keep the farm going, about her mother's decline after his death. She told him about the guilt she still felt over leaving Clara, and Nathan listened without judgment. "You did what you had to do," he said one evening as they sat on the porch while Clara and Margaret played cards inside. "You made an impossible choice in an impossible situation, but you did not give up on her. You found a way to bring her home." "You brought her home," Zara corrected softly. "We both did," Nathan said, and his hand found hers in the darkness between their chairs. By the time autumn arrived, painting the trees around San Jose in shades of gold and crimson, Zara had to admit to herself that she had fallen in love with Nathan Hart. It was not the dramatic, overwhelming passion she had read about in novels. It was something quieter and deeper, built on respect and shared hardship and the simple pleasure of his company. She thought he might feel the same way, but he had never said anything directly. He was careful and proper in his behavior, never doing anything that might compromise her reputation. But there were moments when she caught him looking at her with such warmth in his blue eyes that her breath caught in her throat. One Sunday in late October after church, Nathan asked if he could speak with her privately. They walked to a small park near the center of town, chaperoned at a discreet distance by Clara, who was now fully recovered and enjoying her role as matchmaker. "Zara," Nathan began, then paused as if gathering his thoughts. "I have been thinking a lot lately about my future, about what I want from life." Zara's heart began to race, but she kept her voice calm. "What have you decided?" "I have been working for other people's ranches my whole life," Nathan said, "saving my money, learning everything I can, and I think I am ready now to start building something of my own." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "There is land available east of here, good grazing land at a fair price. I have enough saved for a down payment, enough to start small with maybe 50 head of cattle. It would be hard work, and there would be no luxury for a long time. But I think I could make it work. I think I could build a good life there." He paused, his eyes searching her face. "But I do not want to do it alone. Zara, I know I do not have much to offer you right now. I am just a cowboy with some savings and a dream. But I am a hard worker and I am honest, and I love you more than I have ever loved anyone in my life. Would you consider marrying me? Would you consider building that life with me?" Tears sprang to Zara's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "Nathan Hart, you have more to offer than you know. You are kind and brave and decent. You rode out into the desert for a stranger's sister without asking for payment. You gave us hope when we had none. I would be honored to marry you and build a life together." Nathan's face broke into a wide smile, and he pulled her into his arms, right there in the park with Clara giggling in the background and several scandalized townspeople looking on. Zara did not care. She had found something she had not even known she was looking for, something worth more than all the security in the world. They were married in early December, in a simple ceremony at the small church in San Jose. Clara stood as Zara's bridesmaid, her face glowing with health and happiness. Margaret cried through the entire service. Nathan's boss from the Miller Ranch and several of his cowboy friends attended, along with various boarders and townspeople who had come to know the young couple. After the wedding, Nathan took Zara to see the land he had purchased. It was a beautiful stretch of rolling hills about 30 miles east of San Jose, with a creek running through it and good grass for grazing. There was already a small cabin on the property, rough and in need of repair, but solid. "It is not much yet," Nathan said as they stood looking at the cabin. "But we will make it into a home." "It is perfect," Zara said, meaning it. After everything she had lost, after the fear and uncertainty and guilt, she had found her way to this place, to this man, to this future full of possibility. Clara came to live with them initially, helping to fix up the cabin and settle into their new life. But she was young and restless, and after a few months, she returned to San Jose to live with Margaret and work in the boarding house. She visited often, though, and the sisters' bond, tested by that terrible day in the desert, remained unbreakable. Nathan proved to be everything Zara had believed he was. He worked from dawn to dusk building their ranch, starting with just 50 cattle and gradually expanding. Zara worked alongside him, learning to ride and rope, to mend fences and tend animals. It was hard, physical work, often exhausting, but it was theirs. They faced challenges, of course. There was a harsh winter in their second year when they lost several head of cattle. There was a drought the summer after that, and they had to drive the herd to better grazing land. There were injuries and setbacks and moments of doubt, but through it all, they had each other. On cold winter nights, they would sit by the fire in their little cabin, Nathan reading aloud from whatever book or newspaper they had managed to acquire, Zara sewing or mending. They would talk about their plans, their dreams, the family they hoped to have. In the spring of 1881, 3 years after that terrible day when Zara had been forced to leave Clara in the desert, their first child was born. A son, healthy and loud, with Nathan's dark hair and Zara's green eyes. They named him Thomas, after Zara's father. Clara came to stay with them for 2 weeks after the birth, helping care for the baby and laughing at Nathan's nervous attempts to hold his son without dropping him. "You saved me," Clara said to Nathan one evening as they all sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I never properly thanked you for that." Nathan looked uncomfortable, as he always did when someone mentioned his ride into the desert. "I just did what needed doing." "You did more than that," Clara said firmly. "You gave me back my sister, and you gave her a chance at happiness." "That is more than just doing what needed doing." Nathan glanced at Zara, who was nursing Thomas in the rocking chair he had built for her. "I think your sister gave me more than I gave her." Zara smiled at him, her heart full of love. "I think we saved each other." Life continued its rhythm. The ranch grew slowly but steadily. Nathan proved to have a good eye for cattle and a knack for making the right decisions at the right time. By 1883, they had over 200 head and were able to hire 2 ranch hands to help with the work. They expanded the cabin into a proper house, with 3 bedrooms and a real parlor. Zara planted a garden and fruit trees. They acquired chickens and pigs, making the ranch more self-sufficient. In 1884, their second child was born, a daughter they named Margaret, after Zara's aunt. Clara came again to help, though she had her own news this time. She had been courting a young banker in San Jose, a serious young man named Robert Chen, whose parents had immigrated from China and built a successful business. It was an unconventional match that raised some eyebrows, but Clara did not care, and neither did Zara and Nathan. They had learned that love was too precious to worry about other people's prejudices. Clara and Robert married in the summer of 1885, and Aunt Margaret threw them a celebration at the boarding house that the whole town attended. Zara and Nathan rode into San Jose for the wedding, bringing young Thomas and baby Margaret. As Zara watched her sister marry the man she loved, she thought about how far they had both come from that desperate day in the desert. They had been 2 orphaned girls with nothing but each other and a questionable welcome from an aunt they barely knew. Now Clara was married to a good man with prospects, and Zara had a husband she adored, 2 beautiful children, and a ranch that was finally beginning to prosper. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, coming to stand beside her as the dancing began. "About how that terrible day turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to us," Zara said. Nathan slipped his arm around her waist. "I do not know if I would call it the best thing, but I am grateful for where it led us. If the stagecoach had not left Clara behind, we never would have met," Zara pointed out. "I suppose that is true," Nathan admitted. "But I would rather think that we were meant to find each other one way or another." Zara leaned against him, watching Clara laugh as Robert spun her around the dance floor. "I like that idea better too." The years rolled on, bringing both joys and sorrows. Aunt Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1888, leaving the boarding house to Clara and Robert, who turned it into one of the most successful establishments in San Jose. Nathan's ranch continued to grow. By 1890, they were one of the larger operations in the area, with over 500 head of cattle and 6 full-time ranch hands. They had expanded the house again, adding a second floor with 4 more bedrooms. Those bedrooms were needed. After Margaret came another son, James, born in 1886. Then another daughter, Elizabeth, in 1889. Each child was healthy and loved, growing up with the wide, open spaces of the ranch as their playground. Zara often thought about how different her life could have been. If she had insisted on staying with Clara that day, they both might have died in the desert. If she had reached San Jose and given up hope, if she had not walked into that saloon and demanded help from a stranger, if Nathan had refused or delayed, Clara would certainly have died. But none of those things had happened. Against all odds, everything had worked out. Her sister lived and thrived. She had found love with a good man. They had built a life together that was rich in all the ways that mattered. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, she and Nathan would sit on their porch and watch the sun set over their land, and she would feel such gratitude it almost overwhelmed her. "Are you happy?" Nathan asked her one such evening in the summer of 1892. The children were playing in the yard, their laughter floating on the warm air. 14 years had passed since that August day in the desert. "I am more than happy," Zara said. "I am blessed." Nathan took her hand, his thumb rubbing across her knuckles in the familiar, comforting gesture he had done 1,000 times before. "So am I." They sat in companionable silence, watching Thomas, now 11, teaching 7-year-old Margaret how to throw a rope. James, 6, was trying to catch the chickens while 3-year-old Elizabeth toddled after him, laughing. "Do you ever think about that day?" Nathan asked. "When you left Clara, all the time," Zara admitted. "It was the worst moment of my life, but it led to the best things in my life." "I do not know how to feel about that. I think you can be grateful for where you ended up without being glad about what you went through to get here," Nathan said thoughtfully. "Pain and joy are not opposites. Sometimes they are just different parts of the same story." Zara looked at her husband, this man who had ridden into the desert for a stranger's sister and ended up changing all their lives. His face was more weathered now, with lines around his eyes from years of working in the sun. His dark hair had a few strands of gray. But his blue eyes were the same, warm and steady and full of love. "When did you get so wise?" she teased. "I married a wise woman," he said. "Some of it must have rubbed off." She laughed and kissed him, not caring that the children might see. After 14 years of marriage, she still felt a thrill when he touched her, still caught herself watching him work and feeling grateful that he was hers. The children came running up to the porch, full of demands for cookies and stories and attention. Zara and Nathan exchanged a smile and rose to meet these demands, as they had done countless times before and would do countless times again. Life was not perfect. There were still hard days, still worries about drought and cattle prices and money. There were childhood illnesses that terrified Zara, making her remember Clara's fever and the desperate journey to San Jose. There were arguments and frustrations, because that was part of any marriage, any life. But underneath all of that was a foundation of love and trust that had been forged in a desert crucible and tempered by years of choosing each other, day after day. Clara and Robert had 3 children of their own, and the two families gathered often, either at the ranch or in San Jose. The cousins played together while the adults talked and laughed and remembered. On Clara's 29th birthday in 1895, as they all sat around the big table in Zara and Nathan's dining room, Clara raised her glass of lemonade. "I want to make a toast," she said. "To my sister, who loved me enough to leave me but cared enough to send a cowboy to bring me back. To Nathan, who made that ride without hesitation, and to all of us who have built such beautiful lives from such a frightening beginning. I am grateful for every single one of you." "Hear, hear," Robert said, and they all clinked their glasses together. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Zara and Nathan took a walk under the stars. It was something they tried to do once a week, a way to stay connected despite the demands of the ranch and the children. "Do you have any regrets?" Zara asked as they walked hand in hand through the moonlit pasture. "Not a single one," Nathan said without hesitation. "I regret that day I had to leave Clara," Zara said. "I will always regret that, even though I know I did not have a choice. But I do not regret anything that came after." Nathan stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Zara Hart, you are the bravest woman I have ever known. You walked into a saloon full of rough men and demanded help. You worked beside me to build this ranch, doing jobs that most women would not even consider. You have given me 4 incredible children and 17 years of happiness. If I could go back and change anything, I would not, because I might lose you." Zara felt tears sting her eyes. After all these years, Nathan could still make her heart flutter with a few simple words. "I love you," she said. "I loved you from the moment you agreed to help a desperate stranger. I will love you until the day I die." "And I love you," Nathan said, "more with each passing year." They kissed under the stars, 2 people who had found each other through tragedy and built a life through determination and love. The years continued to unfold. The children grew, each developing their own personalities and dreams. Thomas showed a keen interest in ranching and seemed likely to take over the operation someday. Margaret was bookish and talked about becoming a teacher. James loved horses more than anything else in the world. Elizabeth, the baby, was still too young to know what she wanted, but she had a quick mind and a sweet disposition that charmed everyone she met. In 1898, when Nathan was 43 and Zara was 42, they took a trip to San Francisco, leaving the children with Clara and Robert. It was the first time they had been alone together for more than a few hours since Thomas was born. They stayed in a real hotel with electric lights and running water, marveling at the modern conveniences. They went to restaurants and the theater. They walked along the waterfront and shopped in stores that carried goods from all over the world. But what Zara remembered most from that trip was not the sights or the luxury. It was the long conversations with Nathan, the way they stayed up late into the night talking like they had when they were courting, rediscovering each other as individuals rather than just as parents and ranchers. "Sometimes I forget who we were before we had the children," Zara admitted one night as they lay in the hotel bed. "Not that I regret them for a moment, but it is nice to remember that there is an us underneath all the responsibility." "I know what you mean," Nathan said. "I love our life, but I would be lying if I said I did not sometimes miss the simplicity of those early days, just you and me and the land." "We will have that again," Zara said. When the children are grown and gone, we will have each other and the land and all our memories." "I am looking forward to it," Nathan said, pulling her close. They returned home refreshed and recommitted, ready to face the demands of ranch life and parenthood with renewed energy. The turn of the century brought changes. The wild west of their youth was gradually disappearing, replaced by more settled communities, better roads, and modern technology. Ranching was becoming less about survival and more about business management. Nathan adapted well, though he sometimes complained about all the paperwork involved in running a successful operation. Zara took over much of the bookkeeping, discovering that she had a head for numbers and finances. In 1902, Thomas turned 21 and officially became Nathan's partner in the ranch. It was a proud day for both father and son. Margaret had gone off to teachers' college in San Francisco, writing long letters home about her studies and the exciting city life. James was 17 and already taller than his father, spending every spare moment working with the horses. Elizabeth, at 13, was discovering boys and testing her parents' patience with her sudden mood swings. Clara and Robert's family was thriving as well. Their boarding house had expanded into a small hotel, one of the nicest in San Jose. Their children were bright and ambitious, already talking about college and careers. When they all gathered for Christmas in 1903, at the ranch that Nathan and Zara had built from nothing, Zara looked around the crowded dining room and felt such a swell of love and pride that she had to excuse herself for a moment. Nathan found her on the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the December chill. "Are you all right?" he asked, slipping his arms around her from behind. "I am more than all right," Zara said. "I was just thinking about how different things could have been. How close we came to losing everything that matters." Nathan rested his chin on top of her head. "But we did not lose it. We fought for it, and we won." "We did," Zara agreed, "and I am grateful for every single day." They stood there together, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky, listening to the sounds of family and laughter from inside the house. The years that followed brought the normal rhythms of life. There were weddings as the children grew up and found partners of their own. Margaret married a fellow teacher and moved to Sacramento. James married a rancher's daughter and bought land adjoining Nathan and Zara's ranch. Elizabeth eventually married a doctor and settled in San Jose, not far from Clara and Robert. Thomas married a local girl named Sarah, and they built a house on the far side of the ranch property. They gave Nathan and Zara their first grandchildren, twin boys born in 1907. Zara held those babies and thought about that long ago August day when she had left her own sister dying in the desert. She thought about Nathan's ride to save a stranger. She thought about all the choices and chances that had brought them to this moment. "Are you crying?" Nathan asked, finding her in the nursery with the sleeping twins. "Happy tears," Zara assured him, "just thinking about how blessed we are." Nathan came to stand beside her, looking down at his grandsons. "We are blessed," he agreed. "But we also earned this, Zara. We worked hard and we loved each other and we did not give up, even when things were difficult." "You are right," Zara said. "We did earn this, together." As they grew older, Nathan and Zara gradually stepped back from the daily operations of the ranch, letting Thomas take over more and more responsibility. They had earned the right to slow down, to spend their days in quieter pursuits. Zara took up painting, something she had always wanted to try but never had time for. Nathan worked with the horses, training them with a patience and gentleness that produced some of the finest working horses in the region. They still took their evening walks, though they did not go as far as they once had. They still sat on the porch and watched the sunset. They still held hands and talked about everything and nothing. Clara and Robert retired from running the hotel in 1912, turning it over to their eldest son. They bought a small house near the ranch, wanting to be close to family in their later years. The two sisters, now in their 50s, spent long afternoons together, sewing or gardening or simply sitting and talking. They never forgot that day in the desert, but it had been transformed by time and distance into something almost mythic, the crucible that had forged their adult lives. "You ever wonder what would have happened if Nathan had not gone back for me?" Clara asked one afternoon. "Every single day," Zara admitted. "I still have nightmares sometimes where he does not find you where I lose you." "But he did find me," Clara said gently. "And you did not lose me. We are here together with our families and our lives. That is what matters." "I know," Zara said. "But the fear of loss never entirely goes away. I think that is the price of loving someone so deeply." Clara squeezed her sister's hand. "Then it is a price worth paying." In 1915, when Zara was 59 and Nathan was 60, they celebrated their 33rd wedding anniversary with a big party at the ranch. All four of their children were there with their families. Clara and Robert were there. Ranch hands past and present came to pay their respects. Neighbors and friends filled the house and yard. Nathan made a speech, thanking Zara for 3 decades of love and partnership. Zara tried to respond but found herself too emotional to speak. She simply held his hand and looked out at the sea of faces, all the lives that had been touched by the choice she had made to walk into a saloon and demand help for her dying sister. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Zara and Nathan found a quiet moment alone in the garden Zara had planted years ago. 33 years, Nathan said. "Some days it feels like a lifetime. Other days it feels like we just met." "I know what you mean," Zara said. "Time is strange that way." "You know what I remember most clearly from the day we met?" Nathan asked. "What?" "The look in your eyes when you walked into that saloon," Nathan said. "You were terrified and exhausted and desperate, but there was such determination in your face. Such love for your sister. I thought to myself that any woman who would do that for family was worth knowing." "And now?" Zara asked. "Now I know I was right," Nathan said simply. "You are worth knowing, Zara Hart. You are worth loving, and I am grateful every day that you chose to love me back." Zara kissed him, this man who had saved her sister and captured her heart, who had worked beside her to build a life and a legacy. "I would choose you again," she said. "Every single time." The First World War touched their lives peripherally. James's eldest son enlisted and served in France, coming home changed but alive. The world was shifting and modernizing in ways that sometimes baffled the older generation. But through all the changes, Zara and Nathan remained constants in each other's lives. They grew old together gracefully, their love deepening with each passing year. Nathan's hair went white, and his hands became gnarled from decades of hard work. Zara's face acquired lines that mapped out her smiles and worries. They both moved more slowly, and there were aches and pains that had not been there in their youth. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the young cowboy who had ridden into the desert and the desperate young woman who had refused to give up hope. In the spring of 1925, nearly 47 years after that August day in the desert, Zara and Nathan took what would be their last ride together across their land. They were both in their late 60s now, and such rides were becoming more difficult. But on this particular day, the weather was perfect, and they both felt strong. They rode to the top of the highest hill on their property and looked out over everything they had built. The ranch stretched out below them, prosperous and well-maintained. They could see Thomas's house and James's place next door. They could see the barn Nathan had built with his own hands, expanded now but still fundamentally the same. They could see Zara's garden, tended now by her daughters and daughters-in-law but still producing abundant vegetables and flowers. "We did good, did we not?" Nathan said. "We did very good," Zara agreed. Nathan dismounted and helped Zara down, and they sat together on a fallen log, looking out at their kingdom. "If I had to do it all over again," Nathan said thoughtfully, "I would not change a single thing, not one moment." "Not even the hard times?" Zara asked. "Especially not the hard times," Nathan said, "because those are what taught us we could survive anything as long as we were together." Zara leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "I love you, Nathan Hart," she said. "Thank you for riding into the desert for my sister. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for every single day." "I love you too, Zara Hart," Nathan said, "and it is I who should be thanking you. You made a lonely cowboy into a husband and a father and a grandfather. You made me better than I ever thought I could be." They sat there as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. They did not talk much, just enjoyed being together in the place they had created, surrounded by the legacy of their love. When it grew too dark to safely ride back, Thomas came looking for them with a lantern. He found them still sitting on the log, holding hands and watching the stars come out. "We should head back," he said gently. "Mother, father, it is getting cold." They allowed themselves to be led back to the house, where a warm fire and a hot meal awaited. Their children and grandchildren had gathered, as they often did on Sunday evenings, filling the house with noise and life. Zara looked around at all of them and thought about how close she had come to losing everything. One different choice, one moment of giving up, and none of this would exist. But she had not given up. She had fought for her sister's life, and in doing so, she had found her own. She had found Nathan, and together they had built something that would last far beyond their own lifetimes. The ranch would continue. Their children and grandchildren would carry on the legacy. The story of the desperate young woman and the cowboy who rode into the desert would be passed down through the generations, becoming part of the family mythology. But the real legacy was not the land or the cattle or even the story. It was the love that had sustained them through nearly 5 decades of marriage, through hardships and joys, through losses and victories. It was the unbreakable bond between two sisters, tested by fate and made stronger for it. It was the family they had created, built on a foundation of courage and determination and devotion. As Zara prepared for bed that night, Nathan came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, just as he had done thousands of times before. "Happy?" he asked. "So happy," she assured him. "More than I ever thought possible." They climbed into bed together, as they had done for 47 years, and Zara nestled into the curve of Nathan's body, feeling safe and loved and profoundly grateful. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human joys and sorrows. But inside the ranch house that Nathan had built and Zara had turned into a home, love reigned supreme, a force stronger than death or time or fate. And if either of them dreamed that night, it was not of the terror and desperation of that long-ago August day, but of all the beautiful tomorrows that had followed, each one a gift earned through love and sacrifice, and the courage to hope even in the darkest hour. Their story had begun with a forced separation, with terrible choices and desperate measures. But it had become something magnificent, a testament to the power of love to transform tragedy into triumph, to turn strangers into family, to build empires from nothing but determination and devotion. And when, years later, their great-grandchildren asked about the old photograph hanging in the parlor, the one showing a young cowboy and a young woman standing in front of a rough cabin with the whole world ahead of them. They would hear the story of how love had brought two people together in the most unlikely of circumstances and bound them together for a lifetime. They would hear about the sick sister left in the desert and the cowboy who rode back to save her. They would hear about the ranch built from nothing and the family that grew from a single act of courage and compassion. And they would understand, in the way that children understand these things, that they were part of something larger than themselves, part of a legacy of love that stretched back to that fateful day in August 1878, when a desperate woman walked into a saloon and a lonely cowboy said yes. That legacy continued, growing and branching like the fruit trees Zara had planted all those years ago, nourished by the same love that had sustained her through all the years of her marriage, the same fierce devotion that had sent Nathan into the desert and brought him back with Clara. And in the end, that was what mattered most. Not the land or the wealth or the success, though those were good things. What mattered was the love, the bonds that held them all together, the courage to face impossible choices and the grace to forgive themselves when those choices came at a cost. Zara and Nathan had learned that lesson in the hardest way possible, but they had learned it well. And they had spent the rest of their lives teaching it to everyone around them, not through words but through the way they lived, the way they loved, the way they held fast to each other through everything life threw at them. It was a good life, a full life, a life worth living. And as Zara drifted off to sleep that night, warm and safe in her husband's arms, she knew with absolute certainty that she would not have changed a single thing. Every moment of fear, every tear shed, every hard choice made had led her here, to this place, to this man, to this beautiful life. And that was worth everything.